Okay, so it's almost 5 past, so we might get started. Um, I'll just begin the panel by acknowledging the lands that we're meeting on. Here in Canberra, I am streaming from the lands of the Ngunnawal people, but obviously there might be people from all over Australia here in the call, which is really exciting. And I hope each of you are acknowledging the lands that you're meeting on as well and paying respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. And I also pay respects to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people in the meeting with us today. So today we're going to discuss being an LGBTQIA plus graduate in the public service. This Zoom is being run by Out for Australia, and in particular, the beautiful people at the ACT committee. My name is Dylan. I use he and they pronouns, either is fine. And I'll be emceeing tonight. We also have some incredible panelists. And in a moment, I'll get them all to introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about their experience, where they've come from, and what they're doing at the moment. As I mentioned to some of you who joined early, we have a few different opportunities for you to participate tonight. We have the Zoom chat where you can ask any particular questions you've got. There's also a Q&A feature on the Zoom as well where you can ask questions. And if you're joining us from Facebook Live, you can ask questions in the chat there and someone will be monitoring that and sending them over to me so that hopefully I can pick up on those and make sure that your questions don't go unanswered. We might get started by introducing the panel so you can get to know all of the lovely faces that you're seeing. My name, as I said, is Dylan. I use they and he pronouns, and I am a recent graduate as of last year from the University of New South Wales, where I studied law and criminology. And this year I am a graduate at the Attorney General's Department. As some of you may know, the public service, a lot of people within the public service are also putting up their hands to go and help out with the APS 1000, which is basically a task force responding to the needs of the community with the coronavirus outbreak. And I am supporting with Services Australia for a secondment, which is really exciting. So I've had a bit of experience in a few different government agencies now. And yeah, it's been a really interesting kind of experience and a very interesting graduate year. Not really what I was expecting, but I think there are a lot of pros that come with unexpected experiences like these as well. Before joining the public service, I've always been a huge and passionate supporter of our LGBTQI plus community. I was really involved with my on-campus community as queer officer and as a Pinnacle scholar, and which is from the Pinnacle Foundation, which is a great organization that provides scholarships for disadvantaged LGBTQI plus people. And for 5 years, I also coordinated a national homelessness campaign for LGBTQI plus youth with the Australian Queer Student Network. So I was really excited when I moved to Canberra to join the amazing Out for Australia ACT committee and to help with some of the great events that they run, such as this one here. I might turn now over to Frances, who is the first of our wonderful panelists.
Thanks, Dylan. Hi, everyone. My name's Frances. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a graduate with the Australian Bureau of Statistics. I'm working on the census team in dissemination, specifically in product design. And I'm really loving that. And perhaps I'll talk a bit more about that later. I moved from Melbourne, but originally I grew up in Perth. And what else with Out for Australia? I'm the Deputy CEO of Out for Australia. Previously, I was the Victorian Director. I just love the organisation. I think that the work we do is incredibly important. Thanks very much, Dylan.
Thanks, Frances. Next up is Justin. Hi, Justin.
Everyone. So I'm Justin. I use he, him pronouns. I'm currently a graduate at the Department of Defence. At the start of this year, I was working in Australian industry capability. So that's a program area that deals with supply chains for defence contractors and sort of help involve Australian defence industry in those supply chains. And then COVID-19 hit, and so a lot of the policy grads at defence got seconded to Services Australia. I stayed put, but I moved into the Defence Export Controls branch, where I now do risk assessments for proposed exports of military and dual-use goods. Prior to coming to the Department of Defence, I was in the Australian Public Service for around a bit over 2 years in Melbourne. I was at the Administrative Appeals Tribunal. I proofread the decisions of the tribunal. So it covers a range of things from Centrelink, child support, and immigration matters. And last year I finished my degree in science and law from Monash University. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Justin. Next up, we have another defense graduate, Samuel.
Hi, my name is Samuel. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a procurement and contracting grad in my final rotation. We have an 18-month grad program. So my final 6 months, I'm with the commercial law division. That's been also wild at the moment with the kind of impacts across the sheer multitudes of contracts that I'm sure you know that defense would hold. So that's really interesting work. And yeah, I grew up in Tassie, moved to Canberra for uni. So I've been here before I started in the APS and kind of knew it was a bit of a foregone conclusion that I would spend some time in the federal APS, certainly before I move on from Canberra, and I love it. So yeah.
Thanks so much, Sam. And lastly on our panel, we have Alex.
Hi everyone, I'm Alex and I use she, her pronouns. Firstly, thank you everyone for attending tonight, given it's an online event. I'm very impressed by your commitment to this. I am a former graduate from the public service, so I completed the Attorney General's Department graduate program last year. And I have now settled in my permanent placement in the litigation unit in the International Division. I have been involved with Out for Australia for the past year, and I was actually involved with this particular event last year in Dylan's position. You're doing a great job with that, Dylan.
Thanks.
I have been really fortunate to have made some really great networks with the LGBTIQ+ community here in Canberra since I arrived, including being involved in organising Yes Fest last year, which is Canberra's annual equality festival and has about 500 people attend, a big street party down Lonsdale Street. So that was good fun. Before I joined the public service, I worked in a legal services startup in Melbourne for a number of years. And I also was a researcher for a humanitarian organisation where I did a little bit of work with government agencies, but I've really enjoyed making the move to government.
Thank you so much, Alex. And thank you to all of our panelists for agreeing to speak tonight and for sharing those introductions of yourselves. We might get started with our very first question. Some of us have raised, I think, some really interesting things about the current COVID-19 situation, which we'd love to get into later down the track. But to start off with, as we are streaming from Canberra, all of us, we might throw in a Canberra question. Now, obviously, just because you're in the public service, as highlighted in Justin's introduction, doesn't mean you're Canberra-based. But for a lot of people, it is, I guess, one of the biggest things weighing on their minds when they're thinking about joining the public service is, I'm going to have to move to a new city, especially if they are part of the LGBTQI+ community. Is that going to be pose some challenges for me? So to help you out with those kind of questions, if you are thinking about them, we might ask the panel, in your experience, has Canberra lived up to its reputation as an inclusive and diverse town? What could it do better? And if anything, what do you wish you knew before coming to Canberra or starting your career? We might start off with Alex, as she was the last one to introduce herself.
No worries. I wish that I knew when I started my career that there are lots of people out there who are prepared to give you support, guidance, and mentor you along the way. Often you've just got to ask. And that's definitely something that I think is true in the public service, and absolutely, I'm sure within public service departments in states across Australia as well. I think that Canberra, making the move to Canberra has been a really excellent one for myself. Took a bit of adjusting at the start. I grew up in Ballarat originally, and then I completed my studies in Melbourne for 6 years before moving to Canberra. I find that Canberra is a little bit more similar to Ballarat than it is Melbourne, but there are definitely a lot of aspects of Canberra that I find really charming, including the local cafe scene. It's definitely a great place for foodies, and anyone that likes to get outdoors and things like that. But also there's a really strong sense of community here with people who identify as LGBTIQ+ and their allies. And I think that's just been a really wonderful aspect of me moving here.
Oh, thank you so much, Alex. Next up, we might move to Justin.
Yes, I don't have a whole lot to say about this. So I'm from Melbourne, which is a real big city. I guess the big difference between Melbourne and Canberra would be that you've got in Melbourne, you have like a really urban, city, and then you've got kilometers of suburb, radiating out of that. Whereas Canberra is just all suburbs, I think. Well, I mean, it just feels like that to me. And when people ask me, are you enjoying Canberra? I'm like, I don't leave the house. How am I supposed to know? Like, I mean, even before COVID, it was sort of like I'm a bit of a homebody. I guess the only time I would leave the house for socializing, I guess, would be, I don't know, restaurants and bars. I mean, it's got plenty of that. If so, you're not missing out or anything by coming here. As for whether it's the other part of that question, is it a inclusive and diverse place? I guess so. I don't have a really good comparison for that, because Melbourne was really inclusive. So, well, I mean, I feel it was. So yeah, like if I wouldn't hesitate to move here if if you're looking for a diverse and inclusive place to live. Yeah.
And I think that it's quite interesting because like myself and a lot of other grads who have just moved to Canberra, it's kind of like we just moved and then the pandemic hit. So I think for a lot of us, it has really impacted us getting to know Canberra, I guess, a bit more comfortably as a city, especially the LGBTQI+ scene. So I think that is a really interesting piece of insight that you've kind of shared just then. Frances, you also moved recently. Do you have much to add?
Yeah, I mean, I echo what Justin's saying. I mean, I'm someone who likes to get out and about, and especially if I'm in a new place. And yeah, I've been loving Canberra so far. It's kind of like a big city, but in a country town. I like that sort of duality, I suppose. It's great because everything's so conveniently located, everything's not far away, and I love that. So far, I've felt it's an incredibly diverse and inclusive place. I mean, the Rainbow Roundabout on the main strip definitely helps. Yeah, my first night in Canberra, my friend took me to that place. But yeah, it's a bit difficult, I think, to get a good feel for a city in about 6 weeks, and then being restricted to your house mostly since. So yeah, comparing it to Melbourne and also Perth, I don't know. I've loved all cities, and I think that it's really what you make of it. And each place has its own benefits. I would say. Yeah, Canberra is excellent. Yeah.
Thanks, Francis. And I've left I think our longest living Canberran to last. Sam, what insights do you have to share that perhaps those of us who haven't been here quite as long may not have captured?
Yeah, well, I love it a lot since I'm coming into my 6th year here. I chose Canberra for uni because being from the country, like quite country in Tassie, in northern Tassie, it felt like a good mixture between the opportunities education-wise and inclusivity-wise that a city could bring just through the sheer amount, a greater amount of people, but also proximity to activities I like doing and that kind of way of life. So in that way, it fulfilled all my expectations and more. I do think it was helpful coming for uni because that's given me an ongoing queer community and that is carried on with me. And I keep seeing those same people now in the APS, which is great. And I get a lot of people that are coming later wouldn't necessarily have that, but we're used to people coming in and out of Canberra as well. I think that's a key part of Canberra culture. And so in that way, I think the community is so receptive in a way that when I moved to Sydney for 6 months, I did not find it at all. Is, you know, Canberra just has this thing where you understand that people will be coming in for 3 years for a degree or a year for a grad program or whatever it is. And there's just so much set up for that sort of grassroots infrastructure, essentially, where there are these communities so ready to envelop you. And I would just encourage everyone to, not be so anxious about it, and that we're really good and inclusive community here, for sure.
That's some really wonderful insights. And I think it's a really nice way of putting what's there that Canberra offers as well. Well, thank you, everybody. We might move on from just Canberra specific questions now. And I think we'll launch into one of the more interesting questions that we've got prepared, which is whether being LGBTQI plus has given you any unique insights or perspectives that has helped you in the workplace. Sam, you spoke last. Do you want to speak first for this one?
Sure. I think absolutely. So I'm transgender man, and I think that experience has been sort of alarming in the workplace in some ways, in terms of the awareness it gives you of the insidiousness of misogyny in a workplace. And I think experiencing firsthand how you're treated in a meeting when you're perceived as a young woman versus how you're perceived as a young man has been, just horrifying in some ways. So I kind of try to move forward with my career instead of just forgetting about my past in that particular way, trying to be, to elevate the voices of my coworkers who haven't just been able to transition, and to make sure that a good workplace is one that's letting everyone speak and share their ideas. So I guess that's a unique perspective that sort of takes it one step beyond empathy into actually having walked in different shoes, I suppose.
Thank you. That's, some really incredible insights. Alex, would you like to share? Have you had any experiences?
It's an interesting question for me. I came to the department and I didn't know to what extent I wanted to be involved in the LGBTIQ plus community. I didn't know whether that particular aspect of my life was going to be particularly relevant in the workplace. And I found that once I had joined and I saw how the Pride network was operating internally, I was really interested in getting involved. And in my grad year, I actually applied to be the chair of the Pride network. And I've had that role now for almost a year. And I found that I suppose the unique experience that I've had in advocating for LGBTIQ plus issues within my workplace has also really helped me to gain some connections within the workplace, to really help me understand some of the corporate structures within the department, but also forge some really strong links with the local community as well. It's interesting as well in the sense of providing a unique sort of lens for which I viewed some of my work. I completed a rotation through the Human Rights Unit, and some of the subject matter that the Human Rights Unit deals with touches on sexual and gender minorities. And I found that having firsthand experience in that area, and also having done a lot of reading on diversity and inclusion in policy creation, that I was able to offer my team a little bit more there.
Thank you so much. Frances, do you have much to add to that?
I think for me, one of the unique insights it's given me is that idea of just being authentic, and I think that kind of has to do with being out in the workplace. I think for me, being able to be out and be my authentic self has really helped me feel more confident at work, and has helped me essentially bring that with me to the tasks that I'm doing, and has helped me in the few months that I've been there, helped me build these really great relationships with my colleagues, and just being friendly and all that sort of thing, and I don't necessarily know if that has anything to do with the fact that I'm queer, but just that that's something that I'm a lot more conscious of in how I conduct myself in the workplace.
And Justin, did you have any insights or experiences to add?
No, I think I'd probably just echo what Frances was saying. Like, I think if I'm thinking about my own success in the workplace, I don't necessarily attribute that to being queer or being any one thing. A big part of succeeding in any aspect of life is putting your whole self forward, and you'll find that people will value your perspective as long as you're forthcoming with it. You bring the whole of your life experience with you, and you use that to sort of shape your perspective, your input, when you look at when you're looking at your work in that context, you have that confidence to succeed. That's what really makes a difference, as opposed to trying to hide something because you feel like you might be judged. At the end of the day, if you bring all of who you are into work, you'll find that the whole experience is just much smoother.
Yeah. I want to touch a little bit on something that Alex brought up, which is really relevant to these kind of questions, which is the role of a Pride network at work as well. What have your experiences been of the Pride networks within your department? Does it have a Pride network? Is there some other way that you're able to, feel part of the LGBTQI+ community within your work at the public service? Anyone want to start off?
Sure. Yeah. The ABS has a Pride network. Having only worked in a small business previously, I was really excited to go to my first Pride network meeting. And yeah, I'm still kind of getting used to the idea of how it all operates and everything. But I think one of the things which is really, really cool about the ABS is that you'll see, we have these rainbow lanyards, which are kind of ABS sort of commissioned. You can choose to have that one or the other, the normal APS one. But you'll see senior executives wearing them and being really sort of supportive and those sort of indicators, I think, kind of help make you feel nice and welcome. Yeah.
That's a really good thing. That's a really good piece of insight. And I think I here have since I'm working from home, my beautiful Pride in AGD mouse pad. Alex, I don't know if you had anything to do with that, but that's a great That's a great initiative, I think, as well, just to walk past people's desks and see that there, or see a rainbow flag or something like that on their desk from the Pride Network, which lets you know immediately, you know, wherever you're walking throughout the department, there are these people who are saying, you know, we accept you for who you are, and that they're actively deciding to be allies in the workplace. And it's the same not just with the Pride Network, but with other diversity networks and things as well. And it's great to see. It's great to see, especially as a graduate, that you can be your authentic self, and that there are other people around you who, you know, are actively going to support that. Alex, was it you who came up with the mousepad idea?
That unfortunately was not my idea. We do have a wonderful range of merchandise for the network. We also have very cute little magnets that I should have brought along that have like a little rainbow with clouds on either side, which is my personal favorite. But I'd just like to echo both of your comments on that point, because visibility is so important in the workplace, particularly for new starters, and graduates coming into the workplace as the most junior people within that particular workplace. They're going to be looking for any sign that they're going to be supported and included and respected. And people are only comfortable to bring their authentic selves to work if they can either have that visibly represented to them or sort of displayed to them over time. And I think that's a really important role that the Pride Network plays, either through things like you've mentioned, merchandise is a great one, also through providing the visibility of speakers within your workplace, people who can reflect on their lived experience. You can't be what you can't see, and I think a network plays a really significant role in making sure that you do have role models in front of you that you know, reflect your own lived experience. And the Pride Network also plays a really important role in advocating for employee rights. For example, we have a representative from our committee who sits on the Workplace Relations Committee within the department that has conversations about how employee policies are developed and how they might uniquely affect LGBTIQ+ employees. That kind of role is really, really important in sort of walking the talk, whatever the expression is, but really demonstrating that the workplace is ready to support its employees.
And Justin and Sam, do either of you have anything to add about Pride Networks, or even just maybe perhaps like beyond just your department, I guess, the LGBTQI+ community across the EPS? Is there something that unites people from other departments?
I'd just say that I haven't necessarily seen as much visible support as other people in this panel have. And I think whilst that would be nice, I personally would more go in on holding departments accountable for that advocacy and beyond a rainbow, being like, what are some other boundaries that other specific areas of the LGBT spectrum face, such as name change and stuff like that. It hasn't always been easy or consistent across areas, and that I think that's what maybe has made it hard for Defence to have Pride Network operating across the whole thing, because it's such a large department, with the active forces as well being a large part of the employee base. So it's difficult. I continue to try and get things off the ground, but yeah, I don't know. I'm very happy to have Justin correct me on his experiences with it, but yeah.
No, I mean, yeah, no, my experience has been kind of similar. I haven't really seen a lot, defense-wise. It's not really, I guess, marketed very well. I'm sure I was told that some Pride Network exists, but you know, I don't really know very much about it. And I think, you know, when you're in the workplace, I think your focus gets taken by whatever's in front of you. So if they're not if they're not marketing this, I'm just gonna, you know, I'm just not going to see it. I've got, 10 things to do at once. I've got, just the general work I got to do, plus the learning and development, plus juggling, all these other expectations. So, yeah, it's sort of, it's easy to miss if it's not being very actively advertised. I think the other thing I'd like to say is, I guess the importance of having a Pride network is gonna vary from person to person. And from what I think the panel is saying, it's the big benefit of a Pride network is being able to feel like you're welcome, or being able to feel, I don't want to say like feel at home at work, but feel
All
feel like you can be yourself
these days.
And I know exactly. There's the lines just blur into each other. So yeah, what I'm trying to say is, like, you don't necessarily need a Pride network for that. I mean, if you everyone's got different demands on their time and just different interests in the Pride network. I think what's important is that you sort of your environment is positive and accepting. I've noticed a different. I mean, I've already worked in 2 different areas of defense, and I've already felt, there's a difference here. And yeah, a lot of it is just the people. If you spend time with people who are affirming, how your performance, or just if people just like being around you, that makes a big difference. Even just having people around you, which is what makes working from home a little bit challenging.
Definitely.
But I think any way that you can sort of cultivate, community, or some sense of, being really collegiate in your workforce, that's going to be really helpful to your performance, your mental health, everything.
And I think something that comes through looking at all of those different responses is that the public service is such a diverse and like huge kind of space. It's a whole sector in itself, and there are definitely going to be different experiences throughout. My first rotation at the Attorney General's Department was part of the protective security policy team, and we kind of administered whole of government policy, so policy that affects all government agencies. And one of the, I guess, driving learnings over the past few years with that particular policy framework is that not every agency and entity is going to have the same requirements. And in fact, the context and the situation for all of them is really different. And there are some public service agencies that are less than 10 people. And then you have defense, which is just absolutely gigantic, spread across the country. You'll never be able to really reach all of the employees in the same ways you might be able to in a medium-sized agency with something like a Pride network. So I think that is really something interesting and something to consider as well. And if you are looking at applying for a particular agency and having something like a Pride network is really important to you, it might be worth, I guess, investigating what's there, checking out their website, and asking people who work there about their experiences as well. I actually have, just on that point, talking about specific contexts, I have a question from one of our attendees, specifically for the defense grads, asking about what they think is a unique experience as an LGBTQI+ person within defense. And do any of you have an experience with DefGlis? I'm assuming that's perhaps the equivalent of a Pride network or something else. That's the other thing about the public service. So many acronyms you'll have to learn.
No, I just Googled it, and I've just got this weird feeling that I've never seen or heard about this before. I feel like it's from what I can see, it's more to do with the Australian Defence Force than it has to do with Department of Defence. Okay, so a little bit of a differentiation between those two. Yeah. Well, I mainly say that just because of what I can see on the website. Plus, I just haven't heard of it. I'm sure the Department of Defence has a separate Pride network or related thing. So I don't know specifically about DefGlis. Sam, do you have anything to add, or is it kind of captured in what you've already spoken about?
A little bit, but I have heard about desk lists, but it is definitely for uniformed personnel. I was a colleague invited me to the desk list ball, but I didn't necessarily feel comfortable because it wasn't relevant to my queer experiences with the department, I suppose. And in terms of an experience within defence that is unique as a queer individual, I'd just say having to consider, because it is Australia-wide and because the kinds of people and the kinds of things they might have considered or encountered before is very different. I was particularly nervous about how we have to spend one of our 3 6-month rotations outside of Canberra. As a trans person, when I started with the department, I was at the very beginning of my transition, and I was at a great deal of risk in my personal work life, to be honest. And I think that's something that needs to be considered in a lot of these questions. Having to choose where to go for that and what I might face there was difficult. And even in Sydney, I had a less inclusive, less safe and happy experience than in Canberra. So I'd say that's a unique experience within defence. I think as a department, we know how far we've had to come maybe than other departments, just due to the cultural influences of some older thinking, perhaps, and an encouragement to not be out, an encouragement to get on with it and to get on with the job. And I think that served us well in some areas and not in others. So I think knowing how far we had to come, Defence has done a really good job in a lot of super practical operational ways, which you'd expect. And then in others, it's very hard to unify a culture across an organization like Defence. So I think I can be grateful for the ways in which I have been supported, and also realistic about what was possible from the beginning.
I'll just add one other thing. So, so Samuel's mentioned having to do a rotation outside of Canberra. I believe that is a compulsory thing for the particular stream that he's in. So I think that's was it procurement and contracting? Yeah. So I think the capability stream generally, so that includes things like engineering and a whole bunch of other
logistics.
Yeah. So I think those particular streams will have that. So that's characterized by the 18 months, 3 times 6 month rotations. I think for many of the other streams in defence, you have the option of doing all of your rotations in Canberra. So if location really does matter to you, really investigate that. Like we've said, Canberra is a very inclusive place, and you might find that the difference between Canberra and somewhere else might be a bit too steep for you to tolerate. So yeah, if you're curious about how much relocation you have to do, that's something you might want to look into.
And on that point, someone mentioned before the panel started that Canberra is also known as the gay capital of Australia. I actually didn't know this until I moved here, but it is actually the highest per capita, has the highest per capita number of queer people compared to other major cities. So there you go.
It's too bad it's a very small city.
That's true. That's true. I'd like to kind of touch on something that Sam just spoke about, which was, I guess, about some pressures to not be out at the workplace. And it kind of ties into that discussion we had earlier about moving to a new workplace and the role of a Pride network. One of the questions we have lined up was about the debate about the right level of being out in the workplace. And this debate kind of has, on the one hand, a school of thought saying that it's really important to be highly visible and a role model for the next generation. And then on the other hand, I guess what Sam just mentioned, that pressure to just modify your behavior or suit your behavior to a particular situation, or just get the work done and kind of, minimize that as much as possible. Does anyone have any thoughts about that debate? And where do people stand?
I have one very strong opinion, which is, I think nobody owes it to anyone else to sort of perform whatever their identity is. So, I wouldn't, as a queer person, I would probably take exception to the idea that I should be a queer role model. I mean, I should be a role model. And, I think we should all be, I guess, the best version of ourselves that we can be. And we should serve as a good example to future generations, just as people. But I think if you want to, I don't know, if being a queer role model is something that's really important to you, then yes, absolutely do that. But I wouldn't expect other people to sort of follow that particular example. It's kind of hard enough being queer, being any sort of minority at all, having that added pressure of, you gotta protect yourself from, prejudice and discrimination on account of, being queer. At the same time, you've got to also, I guess, be the big queer role model. Yeah, it's just, I think you should really, you should take care of yourself first. But yeah, that's my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what I would say to this is that it's a really complex issue. I don't think that you can answer this in general terms for everyone. Each person, it depends. Speaking from my experience, I think where the angle that I come at it from is if I feel that I have the privilege to be out, then that's something that I take quite strongly. I acknowledge that despite being a queer person, and you could say that is a minority. I mean, yes, it is. But I otherwise have quite a lot of privilege, and that's something that I want to acknowledge, and I feel comfortable and safe being out, and so therefore I feel like I can be, and therefore should be. But that's my personal experience, and that doesn't mean that everyone should have to feel that way. And there are certain contexts where I might not be out. For example, over the summer holidays, I went traveling in India, and in some ways went back into the closet for a couple of weeks, which is strange, having been out pretty much for 7 years now. I think it depends on your context, and it depends on your personal situation. And I agree with Justin. You don't know it to anyone but yourself to be out.
I'll just echo that point completely. I think the degree to which you want to be out, or to which is the right amount of out to be, is so dependent on you. You might want to be extremely out and proud, involved with the Pride network at work, have a desk full of Pride merch like myself and Dylan at work. But at the same time, you might decide that that's a part of your character or your professional persona that you just don't want to have included. You might just determine that it's not relevant for you to bring up at work. And if asked about it, maybe you'll mention it, but otherwise it's just not something you're going to talk about. And both are completely fine. I think people put a lot of pressure on themselves as well. Once they've been out in one workplace, that therefore they're out in every future workplace after that. That's also not true. You can make that determination with every new workplace that you go to, depending on how comfortable and safe you feel in that workplace, how supported you feel. It might be that you're more out with your small team and not with the whole department. It could be even the other way around. But there's no sort of right or wrong approach. It's really just what's going to serve you the best, and allow you just to feel like you're being authentic and like yourself at work.
Thank you so much. And Sam, do you have anything to add to what our other panelists have said?
Yeah, I definitely do. As much as I echo what they're all saying and really respect that experience, I think that the trans experience is sort of forgotten with questions like this in a way that frustrates me a lot, in terms of it's just how out you want to be. That has not that is not the reality that a lot of people face. I was very visibly trans for a while, and that just not going beyond that in terms of what that means in any other way other than that just meant I had zero choice about being out, and that is terrifying in a lot of ways. These days I do have to consider that balance of we call it being stealth in the trans community, when you're a binary trans person and you don't necessarily discuss it and it's not brought up, and you just, in my case, referred to as he, him, and it's just, yep, he's a dude, let's carry on. And so, but there's a lot of nuance of my life and who I am that is, light is shed on that by coming out. But I just think it's tricky to hear, especially in the workplace, because that was my biggest, darkest, most intense fear starting a law career as someone just starting testosterone. It was just it seemed like a mammoth task. I didn't necessarily have any mentors with a comparable experience at all, and I think I have to sort of juggle it on two fronts in terms of whether I'm out as bisexual or out as trans or not. They're sort of two completely separate issues, and so in a discussion like this, I'd just like to raise the trans thing separately. I think it's really tough. So I'd say to people worried about that, yeah, there are some times where you don't have the option of not being out in the workplace, and that has its own set of challenges, and people will sometimes say that you're making a big deal about stuff, and it's like, great, do you find any other way that I can be called the pronouns I need to be called in the workplace right now? No, then I need to talk about it. Do you know what I mean? So these days it's depending on where I am, like everyone else said, and looking after myself, and also trying to connect through organizations like Out for Australia to try and to be that role model. But that's just because it's important to me, and I pass absolutely no judgment on trans people who fade into a happy stealth life of not talking about it. I think that's everyone's right, and I might go through different stages in my life about that too. Anyway, I'm going on a bit. Go.
Oh, no, not going on at all. I think that's some really valuable experience to share with everybody. And I'm sure there will be people watching this who are really worrying about that exact thing. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I think what you've just ended with is really important as well, that you, and Alex touched on this as well, you're not just kind of out and then out forever, and you don't have to always be out and out forever, and you can you can make the choice to change how much of a role model you're going to be, how much work you can and want to put into doing things like advocating for other members of your community, and how much time you just want to be yourself and perhaps focus on other things, and that's totally fine. So thank you everybody for all of your wonderful responses. We are coming towards the later part of the panel. There are still quite a few questions that we have that we'd really love to get to. If any of the attendees have a question that they really want to ask, if you're on Zoom, there's a Q&A. Feel free to chuck them in the Q&A function, and I'll try and make sure we can get to as many of those as we can. If you're on Facebook, try and post in the chat there, and someone will message that through to me. I have a question that's been sent through by an attendee now, which is, again, relevant to those conversations we were having about the Pride networks, but it's specifically asking, how important do you find support from senior staff, such as SES, for LGBTQI+ grads? For example, SES participating in Pride events, using those rainbow lanyards or the mouse pads that we mentioned as a sign of support. Is there something more that you would like to see from senior leadership, as someone put it earlier, beyond just the rainbow? Anyone have any thoughts?
I suppose, what I would say to this is those signals are important, but if that's all that senior leadership are doing, then you know, that's what I would say that's not good enough. But I think that those signals are really important. I think especially when you're new to be able to see those because they're visible. But I think really championing and being a good ally, and not just saying that they're an ally, but actually elevating the voices of those who are going through various things, and yeah, educating themselves as well, so that they can explain basic concepts that that hopefully people are able to be aware of, so that those people going through that lived experience don't have to constantly go through that emotional labor. I think that that's an example of things that yeah, senior leadership can be doing beyond just those visible signals. Yeah.
I agree with that. Oh, sorry, Dylan.
No, I was actually going to pass to you because I know you've had some specific kind of experience with this.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give just a quick example of something that really reiterates the point that Francis made about, you know, having displays of visible support is great, but really advocating and being an ally that engages in those conversations is also really, really fundamental to the support that SES can provide to a Pride network. So I was involved in organising some training within the department through Pride and Diversity, which is an organisation that provides diversity and inclusion training at all levels for people who are very, very well practiced in diversity and inclusion policies, but also those who have next to no background in it. They delivered a really excellent training that was targeted towards our SES staff, and it was actually very widely attended by our staff, and we had some really great feedback and engagement following that. I had an SES member of staff who approached me afterwards and said, that training really made me think differently about some of the issues that were discussed. And I now know that, yes, I need to have my rainbow pin, and I'm going to make sure that I do wear that, but I'm also going to start engaging in these conversations as well. And for me, that was just a really, really great outcome as far as engaging with some of those senior staff members.
And I know as our graduate first week of graduate training, and our induction was like the same week that training was on, I think in one of the same rooms. So like we kind of like left to go do something else, and then like they were setting up for this training, and it looked, from what I saw, it looked incredible. So that was just another thing that just happened to be in my first week, and I just felt like, oh, the SES are getting trained in, like the secretary is here. I think even there was like some great, yeah, it was really good to see that. We might try and jump to one of our other questions. We have kind of touched on the difficulties, especially being a graduate during this year with the pandemic, but I guess not just limiting it to the grad experience, but more widely. How have members of the panel, I guess, stayed connected to the LGBTQI+ community with these restrictions that we all have to live with? And do they feel, I guess, connected to their workplace and even perhaps their workplace Pride network with these current things going on as well?
Well, I still sometimes stay connected to my sort of my queer network from uni. So they do Zoom chats weekly, and so sometimes I attend those. So that's been really nice, because that's, you know, it's a nice excuse to have a bit of social connection. I find that it's a little bit, I think, because everybody is sort of feeling quite stressed out by the situation. So, you know, you might, I suppose, on a superficial look, you might think, oh, everyone's got time, but I think very few people really have the real appetite to connect with other people, I guess, on like a sort of on an individual basis. So it was nice to have those group things where, you know, you're just there to sort of connect again. So I find that really helpful. And with the workplace in particular, it is really tricky. You'll find that your supervisor has to stay connected with all these other, not all these other people, but like your colleagues, and um, uh, not having that face-to-face visibility is quite tricky, because you're a grad, you want to be seen to be developing and learning, and sort of I guess really vindicating the investment that's been put in you. It's really difficult to I guess show off if you can't see everyone face to face. So that's a bit of a challenge. But I think the best way to go about it is to be really proactive, and we still have we still have Skype and email, and my team's got a group WhatsApp chat going on, so we're doing the best we can.
Yeah, I'd echo that and say that I have my people in my work area at the moment that are just fantastic. I kind of use this event as one way to create my own Pride network, come out to some colleagues, and just try and be a little more calm about that, let them into this part of my life, because it brings me so much energy to advocate. So I kind of brought some people on board just through chucking them a link to the Facebook event for this. So that's been helpful. Even some conversations have started there that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't been open about it. And I do, just if I could briefly link back to the last question, because I did have something to say about the SES involvement, is just that is something that I have really appreciated from Defence. It has been some individuals high up who have seen some of the gaps and really and seen me and what I could bring to the department if I'm supported, and have done that, and also sort out that education. And so it's unfortunate it has to rest on individuals to do, but they are doing it. And I guess I really respect that and appreciate it. And it's that culture as well, flowing down from the SES, that's helped all our teams support each other regardless of what issue it's on, but also for people to check in on queer stuff just as allies. The culture varies, but when it's good, it's good, and it flows from those good leaders.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that as well. I think one thing that I found really interesting about your response, Justin, was that link between I think the community that you have come from. So especially as everyone has kind of mentioned, Canberra's a very transient city, and you're still connected to your queer collective back in Melbourne. And that's something that I've been really lucky to be able to be connected to a community back in Sydney as well. I'm a gamer, huge nerd. In fact, I've got my little queer side dyke here. And the Sydney Gamers, that's Gamers with a Y, was my very first introduction to the queer community. And it was a really tiny group when I joined, and now it's like this gigantic group that hire out some of the clubs on Oxford Street in Sydney, and just have video games and people cosplaying and coming as like really creative, I guess, in really creative costumes. And it's just a really wonderful atmosphere. And that group is having things like, instead of physical events, like streaming games, or having like Jackbox party games on Twitch and things like that. So there are definitely communities out there making the most of this weird situation to connect to people in really interesting and unique ways. And if you, I guess if you are listening and you haven't found a group that you feel super comfortable in, maybe now is actually a weirdly good time to look for those groups and see what they might be doing, and ways you might be able to join them that might not be a physical meeting, that might not be as intense as a physical meeting, but another way you can connect with those groups. So we have reached 7 o'clock, which was kind of our scheduled end time. Was there anything that the participants, any of the panelists, would like to share for the participants before we sign off?
Just thanks to everyone for tuning in, and stay involved with Out for Australia if you can, if you feel that that will be a useful support for you, and reach out. I would certainly like to offer, anyone can reach out to me over private message if they need any kind of mentoring, whether it be queer related or defense or law, whatever it is.
And Francis, did you want to talk maybe a little bit about Out for Australia's mentoring program and some of the other things that we do that could support people that are interested?
Sure. Yeah. So I think mentoring is a really great great point. Yeah. So essentially, Out for Australia exists to support LGBTQIA plus students and young professionals as they're starting out in their career, and our key offering is our online mentoring program, and that is available to anyone to sign up. I've been lucky enough to be connected with a couple of mentors now throughout for Australia, and I can't understate how supportive and that has been for me. And I think that yeah, it's a platform waiting for you. Just if you want some more information, you can head over to our Facebook page or our website, and yeah, join up.
Thank you. And any of our other panelists want to sign off, say anything, share anything before we finish up?
I would just like to say something very similar to what Samuel mentioned. If anyone wants to talk about anything Pride Network related, anything about the Attorney General's Department graduate program, or really just have a chat about anything we've discussed tonight, please feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to engage you on that. And yeah, keep attending online events, keep checking in on your colleagues and your friends to make sure that they're okay during this period of time. It's a particularly difficult time for a lot of people who are working from home and maybe only have contact with a colleague or two each day. So if you can reach out, I'm sure it's going to be really appreciated by your friends and colleagues.
And last but
Thank
not
you
least,
to you,
Justin.
Dylan, as well.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Dylan. It's there's a lot going on, pandemic, organizing events, being here. It's a lot. So yeah, we really appreciate that. Final thing to say to the participants, feel free to reach out to me. I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn. And thank you all for joining us. It's a real pleasure to share what we know and connect with others. It's just a really important thing to do, just generally in life and in your career, but also now in a time where really connection is at a premium.
Thank you so much, everybody. All of the panelists who have shared some really incredible things. I know I've learned a lot having sat on this panel tonight, and I'm sure many of the attendees have as well. Thank you again, all of the attendees. I would like to echo what all the panelists have said. And a special thank you as well to the people who have submitted those really thought-provoking questions that have helped with our discussions tonight. Again, just a quick plug, if you'd like to check out more about what Out for Australia does, just type in Out for Australia on Facebook and you can find us and find out some of the other things we do. We are running some, I believe, some other online events in the future that will be announced, so keep an eye out for those. That's another great way to stay connected to the community and to meet others. And one last thing as well, we're hoping, unfortunately, part of the graduate event when we run this event at the start of the year is a great opportunity to network with other graduates and other people across the public service. And unfortunately, that's a bit more difficult to do that over this kind of webinar kind of situation. So what we're hoping to do coming up shortly is something that is a bit more casual, where you can chat with some other, and more of a discussion style chat with some other graduates who are part of the LGBTQI plus community and the public service. So we can get some of that networking, and so you can meet some other lovely people that way as well. So again, like the Facebook page, follow it, and hopefully you can keep on top of when that event comes out.
Yeah, and I can give you a bit of a sneak preview for those still on the line for the events coming up. So we've got 3 events coming up in the next few weeks. One, given the fact that our discussion about COVID was unfortunately cut a bit short, one is specifically around COVID and mental health. An excellent panel of mental health professionals talking about the situation, especially targeted for our community. We're doing another one in partnership with RMIT about engaging e-networking opportunities by distance for students. And we're also going to be running an event around Ida Hobbit. So lots of stuff happening in that space as well. Yeah, you can hear more about it through our Facebook page and also on our website.
Thank you, Frances. And thank you again, everybody. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your night and very soon a very lovely weekend as well.
Thank you.
See ya.
Thanks, Dylan.